Dr. Morrison, maybe I can start with you. Toxicity as an impact on mental health. How much is it, and what's sort of the mechanism by how that's happening?
Well, first of all, James, thank you for putting this all together. The Functional Forum is fantastic, and I've learned a lot tonight from the two speakers. And just from what they've said, I think we've got a pretty good answer on what toxicity does to the human body, both from a physical and emotional perspective. It's interesting to see how every individual responds to their environment in so many different ways. Kelly and I have been speaking a lot about epigenetics and genetics and how methylation has an impact on how we're able to clear our toxins. And of course, that's become very, like, a great big interest to us. But even knowing that information and doing the detoxigenomic profiles or the genetic profiles that we're able to get from, like, 23andMe, we still find that that information doesn't really always relate to what a person's feeling or going through. So that's where I really believe that the emotional component has to be looked at, and without understanding where a person's symptoms came from, what was happening in their childhood, what was happening around the time when they first experienced their symptoms, that coupled with their genetics or their metabolism really is like a powerful combination in understanding the way of detoxification, how to get the body working properly. And I'm sure we've all experienced this ourselves. When we know ourselves, we're really much better able at knowing the path to take.
And you're a physician. How are you enabling this kind of conversation in a physician's office? What's the mechanism by which you can actually have this conversation? Because typically, your primary care visit is a 7-minute visit, and you're in and out. Does it take a different type of medicine to be able to get into this kind of information? It's a great question, and and your lead-in is perfect because, of course, in 7 minutes, I feel so bad for my colleagues that are practicing conventional medicine that only have 7 minutes to try to unroot the underlying causes of a person's symptoms. We are really privileged in our practices where we are able to spend the time and get to know our patients and get to understand the problems and find the underlying causes that are leading to their symptoms. So it's really what I always say is it's teamwork. I'm just a guide to help them find the path to their solution. And I think that not only am I working on the team with my patient, I'm also working on a team with my friends who are also practicing in ways that I can't replicate. So that's where we like to refer to our acupuncture friends or naturopathic doctors or mind-body medicine people and holistic psychiatrists to help us get people off of their medications that are making them sick. Thanks for sharing that. Gabe, I just want to ask you a question, because when you and I have been talking about doing the Functional Forum for a long time, and one of the things we were passionate about was getting this placebo conversation going. At least to think about that. How excited were you when you saw Seth's blog? We were sort of going back and forth on Facebook saying, oh my God, did you read this, did you read that? And what do you think is the correct role of placebo in the healing process?
Yeah, I mean, this has been tonight has been all about placebo. So it's interesting. This was a mental health topic, but it ended up working its way towards what we've been talking about. And it is exciting. And Seth's blog, I mean, you could see everyone, the most valuable thing that I'm noticing is that the shift consciously of people to realize to use this as part of medicine rather than to try to distill it out of medicine. So, moving forward, it's clearly going to be a part of everything we do, and I mean, it's amazing to share the stage with these great doctors who are next to me and are obviously already incorporating this into what they're doing. I mean, for me, the way I use it is by asking questions that I think are going to make the client that I'm working with feel empowered in the process. So recently, just last month, someone came in who's had debilitating back pain for 3 years, and like Dr. Epstein said, I mean, he's had all the right medicine, the right soup. He's worked with functional doctors, but what I asked him was, okay, so if you didn't have the back pain, what would you be doing? And he really had no idea. His identity had become so tied in with his back pain, and that question seemed to really open up a lot because we were able to see where the back pain started, and it had a lot to do with where he kind of lost himself and his life. And yeah, I'm probably not giving him anything different or better than what he's gotten before, but he's responding, and his back pain has come down. So just having a conscious conversation about placebo between doctors, between Seth Godin, marketing gurus, I think it's just going to open up a flood of information and questions that we can use with each other to help elicit that response. So,
awesome. Thanks for sharing. Kelly, can I ask you about, you talked a little bit about the active placebo in research. How do you start to engage these, because when people come in with a mental health issue, which is the majority of your practice coming in there, how do you sort of flip that switch away from sort of that victim, I've got this problem, to this is a situation that I can deal with? What are some of the placebo maximization strategies that you have?
Well, I think it's sort of like the bind that I mentioned, because I think a lot of the reason that I have good outcomes in my practice is because I can persuade and inspire my patients that I know what I'm doing. So I think part of it, and that I have my nose in the literature every day. So I'm using this potentially, compromised literature base to persuade my patients that what we are doing is legitimate. So we're at, again, a bit of a crossroads where I'd like to envision a future where we don't, rely on this type of database as extensively, because we have something more enlightened to guide our treatment. But I think that I bring such a sense of conviction and passion to what I offer my patients as solutions that they feel, they can trust me, and they feel that they can rely on me as a bit of a compass. But I'm also asking them in a serious way, as if I were writing on my prescription pad, to engage in the treatment and engage in behavioral change. And I use stepwise implementation. Give me 5 minutes of breathing, give me 7 minutes of exercise. Take this one thing out of your diet to make it doable. To not set them up for failure. So I think it's about transferring the power from me to them, I guess.
So we've had an awesome question from Twitter, which is and thank you, Elizabeth, for sending this in. So the elephant in the room at the Functional Forum: who pays for this better model? How does it actually scale across the United States? So maybe this is something you could all participate. Maybe Dr. Epstein as a start. What are some ideas that you have on how we can scale this? Because what you're talking about is a very intricate process with very expensive doctors. How do we make this available for every person in America?
Well, I would say not doing it is more expensive. So that's the first comment that I would make. As we were speaking, I was thinking of, I actually started my career as a Montessori teacher, early childhood education. And I know in school, if you don't deal with the difficulties of that child and you just push it on to the next person, you end up with somebody in 6th or 7th grade who, didn't recover from the 3rd grade. So for me, there's no substitute for dealing with the reality of what that person needs to get well. And however long it takes in time for healing or in process with the doctor, it's much better to do the healing work of what the truth of what might be needed than streamlining it in the context of what the insurance company says or doesn't. Now, I'm not saying everybody can practice how I do, because you can't help people heal themselves in 7 minutes. So I practice very much like a therapist, because I have to spend an hour with my client to get to know them and to engage them in a process and to have them look inside and use resources and references in other ways. But to do from my perspective, to do the deeper core work of their healing, which for many people with chronic disease requires that, in addition to the cleansing and the detox and the supplements and the herbs, that you can't rush that. And so that's just a commitment that the doctor and the patient have to make to the understanding of, the only thing that matters is how we can help you get well, how we can help you face these issues in a healing way. So that's just my perspective on it.
Thank you. Kelly, ideas on scale. How can we actually make this happen more quickly? What are some of the methods that you could see by how that happening?
I mean, as far as implementation, I think, we have to zoom out a little bit, and I think, what you said about it's being more expensive not to do it this way really resonates with me, because for me, I fancy myself as a bit of an activist, and I think that it has to come from grassroots, patient-driven demand for regulation, for safer food, chemical, and agricultural exposures. And I think until that to me is the elephant in the room. Like to inspire health and wellness in the sort of world of medical industrial collusion that we live in today is a bit of a pipe dream from my perspective. So it needs to change. Our food supply needs to change. The way pharmaceutical companies interface with government and doctors needs to change. Data and evidence needs to change. So a lot of that can come from patient demand and from this awareness, from the idea of the internet and digital age sort of spurring that on and growing the power that each individual has to demand something different. So,
yeah. Dr. Morrison, any thoughts about scaling that out to other people? Like, how can we? Do you see evidence of ways that this is being delivered in a cheap and effective way?
Well, number one, if we ever suggest that what we're doing is cheap, I think that cheapens the offering. So I would not call anything scalable cheapening. But I would say that if we look, this is getting into like a debate about healthcare right now, and I would love to entertain that because I think we all have our own feelings about it. But what I would say is, number one, the cost of going to medical school or any kind of qualified healthcare program is quite expensive. So if the cost of that decreased, that would help. Number two, if were able to decrease the cost of malpractice insurance, that would help decrease the cost of people coming in to see healthcare providers. Number three, if we actually got tort reform in place, I think that would be great. Number four, I think that the final thing would be we need to have support on from the top down as well. So what we have right now is sort of all voting people have the ability to get health care for free, almost at this point. And so that is a disincentive for getting health care that's valuable. So to me, it doesn't make sense to try to give people something when they should really want it. And if they want it, they will find a way to get it from somebody who's able to deliver it.
That's a great point. And we've mentioned diet as a cause here. There's obviously the biome type stuff and the gut and psychiatry we just really talked about, but that's really very exciting. Toxicity, from your point of view, what are some of is there strategies that you feel could scale out as far as the detoxifying side of things? Like obviously not purchasing them yourself is probably a good strategy, but reducing toxic exposure, that seems like there could be some areas there for scaling that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would encourage anybody that wants details on this to read my book, Cleanse Your Body, Clear My Mind. But I would say that we're talking about internal and external exposures. So external is, of course, what, frankly, I would give our last mayor a lot of credit for what he did in terms of decreasing exposures in the environment. So, number one, he made all the boilers retrofit so that they were putting out cleaner soot. Also, he was trying his hardest to try to get a tax for decreasing the amount of automobiles coming into the city. And number three, he built a huge pipe up to the aquifers that are bringing clean water down to New York City. So, I mean, he's really created he's done something great for New York. On the flip side, it's internal. So internal things is basically the choices that we can all make to help make us healthier people, and that comes down to knowing how to make the right choices at the supermarket. It's local, seasonal, organic is sort of the mantra we're all saying right now, and it's true, but how do you know where to get it and what it is? And that's through education.
That's a great point. And Gabe, that following on from Dr. Morrison, I know you and I spoke a lot about the fact that we only get to vote once every 4 years, but we're sort of voting every day with our wallets and our what we're consuming. Do you want to just talk a little bit on that? Because I know we spent a long nights talking about these kind of concepts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, the elections are very limited in what's changing, but ultimately we could see that this wellness revolution, the Whole Foods, the enormous supplement industry, everything has been really just about supply and demand, and that people asking for something and spending their money and voting for more of this type of stuff. And as a result, you know, in New York City, we're blessed. I mean, you can go and get local food at all these different restaurants. I mean, you know, there's a lot of demand here for it. People are looking for it, and so it's here, and people have continued to vote with their dollars, and that's really what grows it. So much of what we purchase on a day-to-day basis is either supporting or not supporting what we believe in. So, you know, I think that's really one of the most important ways. And actually, just to get to what you were saying about, you know, how do we scale this? I think a lot of what was talked about tonight is part of it. I mean, one of them is the technology, you know, the tech that's going to allow people to monitor what's going on. I mean, what we heard was that exercise, changes in diets, these are things that are changing your brain chemistry, literally. So, you know, of course, if people were more accountable for their part of what's going on, and they had the tools that would allow them to do a better job of staying motivated and staying in their process when they're outside of the session, we would definitely be able to scale a lot of this. Also, you know, we talked a little bit about group sessions. Now, some of what Dr. Epstein's talking about, the connection and talking to people about, you know, the support they need, maybe it's not the doctor that's the only one responsible for all that. Maybe in a group of 100 people and having one doctor in the front of the room, you got 50 couples, 50 relationships of people holding up that end of it. So all of a sudden you're taking care of some of the, you know, the talking and the support. Now you're taking care of some of the things they can handle at home with the exercise, using the technology. And ultimately, I think it's going to be everyone working together, including the patient, you know, centering around the patient, you know, just taking more accountability for those parts of the process.
Awesome. Well, those are some. I completely agree with that, and I would sort of throw out a challenge to the tech entrepreneurs to solve this problem, because as you said, this is the biggest problem. It's driving chronic disease. Chronic disease is the biggest problem in the biggest economy. It's going to bankrupt not just America but every developed economy as it does, and so we need to find ways to do that. There's already ways to measure stress on a watch. Finding ways to to bring in the group, bring in the family. There's a guy who works for TEDMed who has this idea of wealth. WELLTH, and he calls it this sort of like this healthcare that you're getting from the rest of society that's not driven from a doctor, like from friends and family and so forth, and looking at ways to sort of quantify and maximize that. I think that's going to go a long way as well as the technology. So we have unfortunately ran out of time, but I just want to thank especially Kelly and Paul for doing a great job with your keynotes. Thank you, Dr. Morrison, for being here. We hope to have you back for a keynote address. And Gabe, I think it's been another great functional forum. Thanks so much for all of you guys.